Let's maul in the Central Committee. Let's cringe in the Central Committee. Let's bog in the Central Committee right now.
All right, chat. So last night, I wasn't planning on this, chat, but it happened. It happened. I clicked over to watch Hutch, right? And he was talking about migrant stuff. And he was kind of going hard against progressives. So we're going to listen to the debate that I did on my channel.
Set them up with sponsors. So child detention facilities, it's not a child detention facility.
Okay, it absolutely is. It absolutely is, Hutch. And this is the part where I started talking in chat. So Hutch is reading a Gravel Institute tweet that says, if you are defending child detention facilities under Biden after attacking kids in cages under Trump, you care more about the blue team being in charge than you do about improving people's lives. Now, here's what I'll say about this tweet. This is pretty hyperbolic. However, there's definitely some truth to it because the current facilities that Biden is opening were created under Trump, okay? So these are Trumpian facilities. If you defend them, why were you so worked up about Trump? All right, see if we can find it.
Private contractors.
Okay, so here's what I say. I say, Hutch, my dude, they are detained. They are not free to go and are under the physical control of the state. This is just what it is. Because it is a detention facility, my dude. I'm sorry. Like, basic, that's just what it is. You could say it's a good detention facility, a good juvenile detention facility, but you can't deny it is what that is. And there are alternatives to using juvenile detention facilities for unaccompanied minors. Now, there is going to be some amount of processing when, you know, police, border patrol, whatever, you know, come across a child in the middle of a desert and they say, okay, what the hell is going on here? And they take the child to a station or a facility and they try to figure out who the kid is. Do they have parents? Where are they from? You know, that's that natural transition period, that period of time, you know, 24 to 48 hours, you know, that's natural. That's gonna happen just through the necessity of doing some sort of investigation about who the child is. But a longer term residential facility, nah, dude. That's a juvenile detention facility. Here we go. This is Mike's stream now. Hell yeah, chat. Hell yeah. All right, we're gonna get into it.
All right, Mike. Are you
All
there?
right, let's get.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, do you want to share your thoughts a little bit here? And I don't know how long you've been watching.
Okay, so I think there is
stretched right into the mic
lot of
really good.
complexity whenever you get into a discussion like about immigration policy. You know, people get caught up they get tripped up with lack of knowledge about the process. You know, contextualizing this specific situation, it is why it's so problematic is this facility is a Trump facility. It was created by the Trump administration for the residential detention of children. Now, traditionally, we didn't do this. When children came to the United States, they were given to typically they would have relatives or they would have some other person like the adult they traveled with.
Right.
That would be the person that would have their possession of the child.
Right.
And so that they would be released pending.
I should say guardianship, not possession. I got a little libertarian there for a moment. Let me correct that. So this is what the discussion was about. Was this Washington Post article about the first migrant facility for children opens under Biden? Look at what the sign they put up. This is a Department of Health and Human Services temporary youth shelter for unaccompanied teenagers. Youth who have traveled to the U.S. alone are being placed in this shelter while case managers can locate family or sponsors in the U.S. Once the family or sponsor has been identified as being able to accept and safely care for the youth is provided appropriate transportation to the sponsor. All youth in this temporary shelter have prompt on-site access to medical care, mental health services, as well as 3 meals and 2 snacks a day, telephone access, and daily scheduled activities pending their placement with families and sponsors. Attorneys who represent youth in this shelter provided on-site accommodations to meet with the youth. Elected officials and media who desire a tour of this facility should contact the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to arrange a tour. Please respect the privacy of the youth in the temporary care of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. All right, let's keep going.
You know, asylum case, and upwards of, I think it was 91% of people showed up for their asylum hearing. So there was very low rates of people jumping it.
Yeah, the overwhelming majority showed up for their cases.
All right, let me give you guys more context here by reading the article. So, the first migrant facility for children opens under Biden. Dozens of migrant teens boarded vans Monday for a trip down a dusty road to a former man camp for oil field workers here. The first migrant child facility opened under the Biden administration. So here, this should be your first warning sign. Why the hell is the facility out in the middle of nowhere at a former man camp for oil field workers? They transformed a company town to a detention facility for children. Why is it all the way the fuck in the middle of nowhere? Why would we do that? Literal gulag, correctamundo, very dangerous. The emergency facility, a vestige of the Trump administration that was open only a month in summer 2019, is being reactivated to hold up to 700 children ages 13 to 17. Government officials say the camp is needed because facilities for migrant children have been cut capacity by nearly half because of the coronavirus pandemic. At the same time, the number of unaccompanied children crossing the border has been inching up, with January reporting the highest total, more than 5,700 apprehensions for that month in recent years. But immigration lawyers and advocates question why the Biden administration would choose to reopen a Trump-era facility that was the source of protests and controversy. From this tent city in Tornillo, Texas, to a sprawling for-profit facility in Homestead, Florida, emergency shelters have been criticized by advocates for immigrants, lawyers, and human rights activists over their conditions, cost, and lack of transparency in their operations. So, do you kind of understand where the lines are here? Do you see where the lines are here, chat? About where who supports these facilities and who is opposed to them? Are we all kind of understanding that these facilities are opposed by human rights activists and immigrant attorneys? They don't want sustained protests happening outside the facility, I bet. That's part of why. And also, there's been a lot of problems with these camp guards and these facilities being used to abuse children in extremely creepy and including pedophilic ways, sexual assault. There's been all sorts of problems with these facilities. And when they're in the middle of nowhere, they are much harder for people to supervise and monitor what's going on when children are held there. It's unnecessary. It's costly. It goes absolutely against everything Biden promised he was going to do, said Linda Brandmiller, a San Antonio-based immigration lawyer who represents unaccompanied minors. It's a step backwards is what it is. It's a huge step backward. So you have a woman who represents these children, and she's saying, we do not need this. It's bad. You could almost say that Linda Brandmiller is a subject matter expert, okay? So you have now, I don't know about you, but I thought liberals were supposed to believe the subject matter expert. Linda Brandmiller sounds like a fucking subject matter expert to me. Legal immigration flowchart? Okay. What part of legal immigration don't you understand? Opponents of illegal immigration are fond of telling foreigners to get in line before coming to work in America. What does the line actually look like? How many years or decades does it take to get through? Try it yourself. All right, chat. Let's do this real quick. Do you have family in the USA? Yeah. Is your relative a US citizen or lawful permanent resident? Let's make it as easy as possible. Yes. Are you that relative's parent, spouse, or minor child? Yes. Congratulations. You've found one of the easiest ways to become an American. There are no annual cap on the number of spouses, minor children, or parents of US citizens that can enter, and they generally can receive green cards. After 5 years, 3 years if you're a spouse, a green card holder eligible to become a citizen. After you file your naturalization papers and endure 6 to 12 months of processing delays, you could take a language and civics test, pass it, and you're a citizen. Total time to immigrate and become a citizen. Best case, 6 to 7 years. That's if you are married to a US citizen. It takes you 7 years to get your citizenship. Now, Donald Trump condemned this. The reason why I went through this process is because Donald Trump condemned it. You probably heard this phrase before. It was called chain migration. You guys ever heard of this? Chain migration, Trump. By the way,
Fourth and final pillar protects the nuclear family by ending chain migration. Under the current broken system, a single immigrant can bring in virtually unlimited numbers of distant relatives. And how about chain migration? How about that?
He's just making shit up, by the way, in case you're wondering. So what he's talking about is so when he says a single migrant can come in, so somebody who became a citizen, and by the way, takes 7 years, best case scenario, can bring in their parents or their children. Imagine being a US citizen and not being allowed to bring your children into the country. I can't think of a more disgusting immigration policy than that. That's your rights being impinged upon. And what's really funny is Melania used chain migration. Melania brought in her parents. And so what if you're just a migrant worker? You want to go pick some radishes on a farm in Alabama, chat. You want to pick some radishes on a farm. You want to work a couple months, earn money for your family, and then go back to Mexico. How do you come here legally? Chad, do you know how you come here legally? Are you skilled? Sorry, there is no process for unskilled immigrants without relations to the U.S. to apply for permanent legal residence. Only 10,000 green cards are allotted every year, and the wait time approaches infinity. Those who receive H-2A or H-2B temporary visas for seasonal work cannot transition to a green card. Are you skilled? Yes. Can you prove that you're a genius? What about a star athlete or an investor worth $1 million? Congratulations, you found the quickest way to get a green card, taking 12 to 18 months. But you have to have made it anywhere. You would have made it anywhere, Mr. Beckham. With your green card, you become a citizen in 5 to 6 years. Total time to immigrate, 6 to 7 years. Do you have a college degree or a specialty occupation? Okay, then you have a shot if you have a job offer. No, you're out. Yes. Is your employer willing to file the paperwork for labor certification and conduct a new job search for your position and pay $10,000 in legal and other fees? Yes. Well, then the wait time for a green card is typically 6 to 10 years. If your employer can't wait 6 to 10 years for you to start work, is he willing to apply for your temporary work visa, H-1B? Yes. Then you have a 50-50 chance of getting your H-1B because these visas are capped at $85,000 per year, well below the total demand. They run out on the first day they become available. If you are lucky enough to get one, you could start working in the country and your employer can apply for your labor certification and green card. So that's the legal way of coming in to the country. And then we could talk about lawful permanent resident stuff. Is your relative a U.S. citizen or U.S. lawful permanent resident? So that's if you have a United States citizen relative. If you have a lawful permanent resident relative, you come in. Are you the spouse or child of a lawful permanent resident? No. Can't come in. No grandparents. If you're the child, are you a minor? No. Are you single? No. Sorry, you don't qualify. Are you a minor? Yes. Spouses and minor children of lawful permanent residents can apply. Wait time depends on home country. Wait time 5 to 7 years. With a green card, you can likely become a citizen after 6 years. Total time to immigrate and become a citizen, 11 to 13 years. If you're a child. What about if you're not a child? If you're single, yes. Wait time for a single adult child of a lawful permanent resident, 9 to 14 years. Typical time to wait and become a citizen, 14 to 20 years. So if you try to immigrate to the United States, your parent has a green card, you're 18 years old, you will be a citizen at 38. Sounds like a good system that totally is fine. What if you're not? Raising a highly skilled person probably costs a country they're from a lot of money. When they lose a country, the US, when does that racist agitation that talks about being invaded? Yeah, pretty amazing, isn't it? And if you come in as a student, the amount of years you stay doesn't count towards your green card. Correct. How the hell are you supposed to plan for your future here or there if you're in an 18-year limbo? Well, you could be doing stuff while it's pending, right? Anyway, during the campaign, Biden pledged to undo former President Donald Trump's hardline immigration policies. In his first month in office, Biden signed several executive orders reversing many of those policies. Last week, he and House Democrats introduced a plan that would provide a path to citizenship for 11 million undocumented immigrants. The administration also reversed some of Trump's expulsion practices by accepting unaccompanied children into the country, a change that is also contributing to an increase of minors in government facilities, officials said. So this is where we're at right now. You have a situation where, all right, the administration also reversed some of Trump's expulsion practice by accepting unaccompanied children into the country, a change that also contributed to an increase in minors in government facilities. So in other words, Trump just said, oh, you're a kid, and they sent you back to their home country. They didn't even try to help an unaccompanied child. So Trump is truly fucking evil. At the 66-acre site, groups of beige trailers encircle a giant white dining tent, a soccer field, and a basketball court. There's a bright blue hospital tent with white bunk beds inside. A legal services trailer has the Spanish word "Benvenidos" or welcome on a banner on its roof. Yeah, don't even start with the Spanish. There are trailers for classrooms, a barbershop, and a hair salon. Their facility has its own hospital, ambulances as fire trucks, as well as its own water supply. The mind-boggling waste is unbelievable. Unbelievable, the mind-boggling waste. Must have been nice to be able to sell them their own ambulances and fire trucks, right, chat? As opposed to having this facility nearby a city with its own services We need to buy ambulances and fire trucks and drive them out in the middle of fucking nowhere. The operation is based on a federal emergency management system, Weber said. The trailers are labeled with names such as Alpha, Charlie, and Echo. Staff members wear matching black and white t-shirts displaying their roles. Disaster case manager, incident support, emergency management. HHS has 13,200 beds for children, having exploded in growth in the past 4 years, adding more than 80 facilities for a total of about 200. Weber said putting children in permanent shelters is preferable to the influx shelters like Carcerio, but nearly half those beds are unusable during the pandemic. As of Sunday, there were 7,000 children in HHS custody, over 90% capacity under pandemic era requirements. Every kid that comes into this program is a symptom of a broken immigration system, said Weber, who has worked at HHS since 2012. So today, we've got over 7,000 symptoms of a broken immigration system. Okay, here's what then Weber says, oh, HHS isn't as bad as ICE. The influx facilities also cost more, about $775 a day per child. I'll say that again, $775 a day per child. If those kids went and stayed at the Ritz-Carlton, we would save money compared with $290 a day for permanent centers. Cars sit parked outside the dining area in the facility. Look, this is where the money went. Look at this. Look at this. Brand new vans, SUVs, cars. How are we going to pay for it? Look at the air conditioning. Look at the air conditioners. The amount of electricity to air condition a tent in a fucking desert. Weber said the influx shelters kept children from ending up at border patrol stations, which have holding cells that were not designed for children. During the 2019 immigration surge, many migrants were stuck in overcrowded cells for prolonged periods that exceeded legal limits. The detention centers overseen by ICE are reserved for adults or families and are often run by private prison companies. Carcerio Springs is run by the nonprofit BCFS Health and Human Services, a government contractor for the Office of Refugee Resettlement, the agency within the HHS that focuses on unaccompanied children. Most of these children arrive to the United States planning to reunite with sponsors, usually relatives or friends of the family. Office of Refugee Resettlement case managers work with the children to identify and conduct background checks on the sponsors. If cleared, children are released to live with them while they go through the immigration court process. When I read they were opening again, I cried, said Rosie Ababora, a San Antonio community activist who was arrested for protesting outside the camp in 2019. I consoled myself with the fact that it was considered the Cadillac of migrant child centers, but I didn't have any hope that Biden is going to make it better. She said, despite what she's heard about the camp's amenities, the immense cost and scale of the Office of Refugee Resettlement Operations points to a government program that profits from holding migrant children who are shepherded in unmarked vans to remote areas with what she describes as little oversight. Brad Miller, the lawyer, said people should take note of how these emergency shelters are often located in far-flung locations away from public view. So this is something that I would really urge you to take a look at, which is, why are these facilities in the middle of fucking nowhere? Why are these facilities in the middle of fucking nowhere? Serious question for all of you. Consider, why is this happening? This is done deliberately to shelve these children in places that are not only not readily accessible, but also not accessible at all to anyone who cares about the quality of life of these kids and whether or not they comply with federal laws, she said, referring to the Flores Settlement Agreement, which recommends children not stay in unlicensed facilities for longer than 20 days. HHS has said its goal is that children remain at Carcerio for about 30 days, so they are coming from at least 2 weeks of quarantine at other Office of Refugee Resettlement facilities in the region. The average stay for children in custody across its facilities is 42 days. In 2020, migrant children spent an average of 102 days in federal government custody, according to the HHS. So far, no children in HHS care have been hospitalized for COVID-19, Weber said. If we could find another way, that'd be great, Weber said. On the flip side, these kids just come in and they're turned loose on the street. They end up being homeless kids. But Brand Miller is worried that this is the latest government tactic to deter immigrants from seeking refuge in the United States. She said the Biden administration should not be reviving old systems, but looking for new solutions. If they were actually addressing the issues that are endemic to the system that has been established for many years and is flawed, they were addressing the inadequacies instead of creating a parallel jail for kids, I would have more hope, she said. So this is where the debate took place. That's the context, chat.
Like a Republican talking point.
Yeah, so we don't, and first of all, this is legal immigration. Contextually, like if you want to step back a couple decades, up until the 50s, all it took to become a United States citizen was to reside physically in the United States for 2 years and be white. Okay. If you reside in the United States and you were white for 2 years, you became a citizen, and that was the first immigration naturalization law that was passed in the 1780s. So, and that was the law all the way up to the 50s. And we had the
Here,
Chinese
just in case,
Exclusion Acts.
everybody, and by the way, I lied. It was I said the 1780s. It was actually 1790. So sorry about that, Chad. 1790 Act set the new nation's naturalization procedures. It limited access to U.S. citizenship to white immigrants, in effect, people from Western Europe who had resided in the U.S. at least 2 years and their children under 21 years of age. It also granted citizenship to children born abroad to U.S. citizens. So, in other words, America's first immigration law was be white and be here for 2 years. And then you were a citizen and all your kids who were under 21. So I was spreading misinformation when I said the 1780s and it was really 1790. Sorry, chat. Sorry. That was our old immigration policy. So if you're here and you're white and you're like, my relatives, they followed the law. That's why I'm a citizen. My relatives, they came over here and they followed the law. Well, the law was come here and be white. I don't see a problem with that. Now, this is what I think it should be for everyone. We should go back to this, and instead of saying be white, just say live here 2 years and intend to become a United States citizen. Go through some formal process where you declare allegiance to the US or whatever and renounce your old citizenship, and then you become American citizen. Period. That's it. All right, let's keep going. Let's go back to the debate.
And other things earlier to kind of try to prevent non-white immigration from coming to the country. Then we had quotas. People from Southern Europe, they were not considered to be, preferred. So there was quotas on that. And we had this kind of racialized immigration system that has developed since then. And the current system is a continuation of that.
I was talking to the stream before you got in here. I don't know if you were in here for that spot, but I think they really ramped up tightening our southern border during the 70s. It was like shortly after.
Well,
it was shortly
man,
after
I
Vietnam.
want to. So the first, man, I don't know if okay. So to explain it, there was an immigration policy from President Eisenhower. Are you familiar with this?
Vaguely. It's been a while. I remember listening to a.
Okay, so I am gonna. This is fully within context, and we're gonna try. But this was the operation. The Immigration Law Enforcement Initiative created by Joseph Swing, the director of the United States Immigration and Naturalization Service. This is what I was talking about. It was created in June 1954 by U.S. Attorney General Herbert Brunel. So here is U.S. Border Patrol packing Mexican immigrants into trucks and transporting them to the border for deportation. And so they called this Operation. And if you go and look at it, so here was the United States Immigrant Enforcement Actions, returns and removal from 1940 to 1960. So as you can see, command teams of 12 Border Patrol agents, buses, planes, and temporary processing stations began locating, processing, and deporting Mexicans who had, quote, illegally entered the United States. There were 1,074,277 returns defined as confirmed movement of an inadmissible or deportable alien out of the United States not based on an order of removal. In the first year of operation, this included many workers without papers who fled to Mexico fearing arrest, and over 500,000 from Texas alone. So one of the biggest problems caused by the program for deportees was sending them to unfamiliar parts of Mexico where they struggle to find their way home or continue to support their family. So this was our first immigration and one of our biggest INS operations. I wonder if you could say that we have a history of racism. Chat, would you say there's a history of racism here happening? I don't know. You tell me. You tell me if there's a history of racism in these programs. I don't know. I'm having a hard time figuring it out. You let me know.
This American Life episode on it or something?
Yes. It was called Operation Racial Slur for Mexican people. And they forcibly deported, I want to say it was well over 1 million people.
That was in the first year. Sorry, chat. This is
want to get us,
Forgive me because I was trying to remember this stuff off the top of my head, and I wasn't researching. I was just, So I'm gonna fill in, the pieces of evidence as we do this debate, which we've barely started, because I am taking so much time to give you guys context. But let's keep going.
One of us in trouble, but that's just the name of the fucking operation. I don't know what to say.
Yeah. Well, I think slur is fine.
Yeah. And if you look it up, it was implemented in June 1954, and it was a target, as you rightly point out, targeting Mexicans who had set down roots in the United States, who had, many of them were laborers, agricultural laborers and other laborers who transferred back and forth through the border.
Seasonal work was really common. People would come up for a few months and then they would go back with their families.
And during World War II, we had something that was known as the Bracero program, which was a migrant program during World War II to allow Mexican laborers to work in the United States. With short-term contracts. Obviously World War II, labor shortage, United States, drew on Mexican labor to help fill those gaps. And so there was a long and that the Mexican-American border had always been porous, going back to when we stole half their country in the Mexican-American War. Or when, the Texas Rebellion, where slavers came into a territory that was a free state, white settlers brought their slaves and then, revolted against their government for Texas independence. We had a long history of illegal white immigration into Mexico. And then later we had a long tradition of, Mexican workers coming across the border to work in the United States.
So bring it back to today then.
So the problem that people are having with this immigration facility is...
All right, so just so you understand the context, Hutch is kind of defending Biden's policies and saying that us lefties are being unfair to Biden, right? Us lefties are being too harsh and too unfair to Biden, and we're not being realistic, et cetera, et cetera. And they're not kids in cages anymore. They're kids in migrant detention facilities, okay?
We are now, see, back in 2014, I remember there was a program of there was a large surge of unaccompanied minors.
Yeah.
And they were coming to the United States from Central America. There's a number of countries who we had in the Obama administration contributed to the, I don't know how to say this. We supported a coup in the Honduran government.
Right.
And that resulted in a far right government that was a narco trafficking, basically corrupted with narco traffickers to take over the government, and it completely destroyed.
Airman, thanks for the prime. Too many L's.
So MS-13, narco trafficking gangs exploded, and that resulted in a large number of refugees and people saying, hey, I don't want to be out on the street and get extorted, raped, attacked, murdered, have my young child being forced to join a violent gang, right? So they decided, we should probably try to, make it to somewhere safe. And America is, a lot of poor people around the world think of America as a country you can go to. And
so this is what I am talking about. It was the 2009 coup in Honduras. Pentagon officials may have encouraged a 2009 coup in Honduras. Military officers at the Center for Hemispheric Defense Studies helped coup leaders at cross purposes with other U.S. government agencies. The 2009 Honduran coup d'etat, part of the 2009 Honduran constitutional crisis, occurred when the Honduran army on 28 June 2009 followed orders from the Honduran Supreme Court to oust President Manuel Zelaya and send him into exile. Zelaya had attempted to schedule a non-binding poll on holding a referendum on convening a constituent assembly to rewrite the constitution. Zelaya refused to comply with court orders to cease, and the Honduran Supreme Court issued a secret warrant for his arrest dated 26 June. 2 days later, Honduran soldiers stormed the president's house in the middle of the night and detained him for stalling the poll. Instead of bringing him to trial, the army put him on a military airplane and flew him to Costa Rica. Later that day, after reading of a resignation letter of disputed authenticity, the Honduran Congress voted to remove Zelaya from office and appointed Speaker of Congress Roberto Micheletti as his constitutional successor to replace him. Now, what do you think his policies were? What do you think his policies were? Why do you think he got couped? Elected as a liberal, Zelaya shifted to the political left during his presidency, forming an alliance with the Bolivarian Alliance for the Americas, known as ALBA, on 28 June 2009. Oh, that's weird. Oh, he shifted to the left. Uh-oh, spaghetti-o. Anyway, going on.
So that resulted in a large number of children who were just sent here with no accompaniment. And that was a difficult problem of what do you do with a child that just shows up in a country?
There's no good answers. There's only least bad answers, in my mind at least. Unless you have some sort of an alternative, but I don't know if we can.
Are we the baddies?
Because it sounds like you're still setting something up.
All right, chat. So the answer to the question is the United States the baddies? The answer is yes. You are 100% the baddies. I think I've just shown 5 things already in our immigration policies. How many do you guys feel, and gals and non-binary pals, do you all feel like you have learned something? Do you feel like you've learned a lot about American immigration already that pisses you off tremendously, and now you realize why right-wingers are even bigger scum than before? Ah, now you know why I hate right-wingers. No? Wow, Avenger Dragon, I'm glad that you were so educated. The reason we have Latin American refugees coming here is we have destabilized their governments for decades. We have destabilized their governments, correct. And that's the thing that's gross. We won't even allow social democrats in Latin America, let alone lefties. The equivalent of Bernie Sanders being elected in a Latin American country gets immediately killed or couped. We're not talking about full-blown authoritarian commies here. We're talking about, well, we want to tax the rich, maybe provide some education. That gets you couped.
So I think this is a situation where the United States helped create an environment where there's now these like large groups of unaccompanied children, and they're coming here with, you know, obviously a legally recognizable reason to be here, you know, fear for their lives. Yeah, an asylum claim, exactly. And the reason why this specific facility is getting so much negative attention is because it is everything that Biden said he was against. It is a for-profit Trump facility for the purpose.
So I was wrong. It's a quote, not for profit facility. So I was wrong about that. And Hutch corrects me here. I thought it was one of the for-profit facilities. It's a not-for-profit facility, but I want to explain something to you. There is basically no difference. A for-profit facility can be openly about retaining a profit, right? Whereas a not-for-profit facility can't have profits at the end of the year, okay? There is a, well, at least that's the design of a not-for-profit facility, right? However, as you saw earlier, the facility had incredible waste that was $776 a day per child. Who do you think's being enriched? The non-government employees and managers of this organization can pay themselves exorbitant salaries and then charge the federal government big, and then the organization as a whole is a non-profit. We're seeing that more and more in the United States. So this is where I make a factual error, and Hutch was there to say, actually, it was a nonprofit. And when we look it up and I say, oh, okay, you're right. I confused it with other for-profit facilities that ICE currently runs and HHS runs and other places. When Biden passed signed an executive order closing for-profit prisons, he exempted for-profit prisons for ICE and HHS of keeping children in residential detention.
Wait, this one is run by a nonprofit, is what I read in the Washington Post article.
Is that true? I know that when he passed his ban, that might be possible. Let me just make sure I don't want to say anything that's wrong.
Let me try to find it in the actual. Okay, so the detention centers overseen by ICE are reserved for adults or families and are often run by private prison companies. Carrizo Springs is run by the nonprofit BCFS Health and Human Services, a government contractor for the Office of Refugee Resettlement.
You're right.
If you don't know who Hutch is a longtime Twitch personality, gamer, been on the platform for a while, kind of one of the original guys. And so, you know, he's been dipping his toe more and more into politics, right? So we are doing our best to educate.
There are other facilities that are for profit.
Yeah.
You know, Biden put out a executive order being against for-profit prisons, and then he drew in a huge exception for HHS.
Yes, yeah.
For this. And it's like, wait a minute. I thought we were going to have a clean break from, you know, the Trumpian, you know, for-profit facility. And this one may be although this one was developed during Trump's administration, right?
It was converted from, it used to be, what do they call it? A man camp for oil workers, for like federal contractors that were working near a project and they would temporarily live there. So they certainly didn't set it up.
Gotcha.
They didn't set up these facilities to be like chain link fences and cold.
Yeah, but that's concerning because they literally do have chain link fences.
It's locating the children far away from like population centers, right? So it's kind of difficult for people to get there and like monitor it because it's in the middle of nowhere.
That is something that I completely agree with in terms, and I was telling the chat this, that we should be we should be engaging in more oversight in these facilities for sure. To have people that are physically going to these facilities to monitor the activities, to check in on the kids, to make sure that there's no heinous shit going on, because we've all heard those nightmare stories. But I think typically that more happens in ICE detention centers than it does in HHS centers. But my problem with equating what Biden did with what Trump did is that it completely ignores the fact that this facility is being opened up to accommodate thousands of kids that are being allowed into our system, as opposed to just turning them away at the border like Trump was doing. And they're attempting to allow more space so that the kids aren't in close proximity with each other, and therefore you don't have these like super spreader events at these facilities. So the fact that it's even being opened up in the first place, like, yes, it is removed from society, and yes, this was a facility that was repurposed during the Trump era for like 1 month in 2019. But we have to look at the conditions in the facility itself. And this is in no way.
This is Hutch from YouTube way back in the day.
That we saw go viral a few years ago.
Well, okay. I mean, a lot of those images happened in 2014, which is something that all of us have been pointing out.
Yeah.
So one of the big mistakes, and this is why a lot of people on the left are so strongly pushing back so quickly, is one of the mistakes that Obama made during his administration is he was like, well, if I'm tough on immigration, then I'll get credibility with the Republicans and they will work with me on an immigration bill that will solve these problems because, hey, you can't say that Obama's tough on immigration. Look how many people he deported. He deported more people than George W. Bush.
No,
he's crazy.
But wait, hold on. They changed the way that they classified deportations during the Obama administration. So before, under presidents like Clinton and H.W. Bush and George W. Bush, if you were turned away at the border, they didn't classify that as a deportation.
I think that there is a element of truth to that, but they also did in fact step up. It did in fact step up other forms of deportation as well.
No,
there was an increase. There was a surge in deportations under Obama.
I'm sure that there were times during Obama's administration where you saw surges in deportations, but the fact is that he did specifically target people that had violent offenses. And if you if you take away the deportations that happened at our border, turning people away, he actually deported.
All right, I explain why Hutch is pretty much wrong here in a second, and we're gonna get into it. But I have a lot of sources for my information that I'm gonna show you now that we're in the next day, and I'm think about it for more than 2 seconds. I have sources to show you what I was talking about.
Less people than his predecessors. And I would highly encourage you to fact check me on that one, because I just went over this a week ago with my stream, pulled up the article and everything.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a lot of moving parts to this argument. The first is like, hey, he changed the definition of deportation, so it wasn't actually the same You're not comparing like to like, I guess is what you're trying to say,
it's
right?
Not,
like
the deporter in chief, I'm saying, is a moniker that is not deserved.
Well, first of all, deportation is not actually technically a legal term, okay, that our courts use. And we'll get into why that's significant. So when people call you a deporter in chief, that's a non-legal term. We'll talk about the legal meanings behind them in a second.
It's born out of a misunderstanding of the process, is what I'm saying. I'm not defending every part of Obama's immigration failures, because clearly many of those facilities and the infrastructure that we had set up in place was not built to withstand the sort of surges that we saw at our border, and they didn't act quickly enough. And that is on Obama. And if something like that happens on Biden's watch, that will be on him as well. And I understand people's apprehension with organizations like HHS or ICE or DHS, given their track record, especially in the last 5 years. So it's not that I'm over here failing to understand why people have concerns, but what I'm concerned with is the sort of hyperbolic nature of how this is being categorized. I don't think it's I don't think it's helping people understand what the actual problem is.
So there's a lot of things. So I'm glad you did research, because this is a good conversation. But I'm going to disagree with you on some of this stuff. So under Bush, there's different types of immigration removals take place, right? There's deportations, there's returns, there's removals. So deportation, okay, so by the way, chat, deportation is the grand This is the grand category that includes returns and removals, okay? So when you say how many people were, quote, deported in America, there's returns and removals. Removals are what you would think of as deportations, where a judge makes an order, the ICE goes and gets you, and they physically throw you out of the country. That's a removal. A return is when you're like, okay, I'm not supposed to be here, and you voluntarily go back, all right? That's the difference. So Bush did a lot more of those returns. Obama did a shit ton more removals. So when people say deporter in chief, they are right. Because what you think of as the deportation, Obama went buck wild on. You going, you caught me, I'm not here legally, let me go back. And they're like, okay, you voluntarily returned. That's what they did under Bush. Under Obama, they kicked your door in, okay? So that's the difference between the two. And we're gonna get into that in a second.
So these are different categories of activity. You could say that, so if like under Obama, they did a lot more removals than they did under the Bush administration.
Can you
But they
explain
did
the difference
less
between
returns.
a removal and a
So,
return and a deportation? 'Cause I don't know the difference there.
Okay, so they narrowed their focus to like recent arrivals, so people that had just recently crossed the border, and people who were had criminal records, right? So that was the strategy that Obama took place, and he went away from the stuff that Bush had been doing, like focusing on.
So here, okay, I'm gonna bring my explanation is pretty good, but I'm gonna give you a better explanation right here. And it says removal and return have become the main terms in immigration enforcement over the last decade. This is an article from Vox, right? Returns are a very specific immigration enforcement action. According to Teresa Brown of the Bipartisan Policy Center, returns refer to Mexicans or Canadians who were trying to enter illegally and were apprehended at their own border. These people, instead of being formally placed into proceedings, are simply turned around and prevented from entering the United States. Before 2006, this was known as a voluntary departure. All right? Removals have much harsher consequences than returns. Unauthorized immigrants who are removed from the country are ineligible to apply to re-enter legally for a period of years. If they try to come back to the U.S. illegally and succeed as of 1996, the removal order is reinstated and they can be deported again without another trial. People who are returned, by contrast, are not subject to formal consequences. They can turn back around and try again, or they can apply to re-enter the country legally. Bush had more returns than Obama. Obama had more removals. So in other words, Obama was much harsher on immigrants than Bush. That's why he's called the deporter in chief. And I think there's a chart I want to show you. Here it is. So total immigration deportations. Now, deportation includes returns and removals, but you wouldn't think of a return as a deportation. That's just a, whoops, my paperwork wasn't in order, I'm going back to my own country to fix my paperwork. A deportation is a formal proceeding where you're barred from the country. And that's the blue category. Look at this. Look at the blue. Look at the blue. Obama did way more. And this trend continued because this article was back in 2014, right? So this continued under Obama. He was deporter in chief. That's the blue. You see the returns, the voluntary returns, the low stakes return massively declined. And I have another thing from the Migration Policy Institute, which goes through this. If you look at the totals of each category, so for Bush, removals, 2 million. Returns, 8 million. Under Obama, removals, 3 million. Returns, 2 million. So they did 50% growth in harsh deportations under Obama. Under Clinton, there was only 869,000 removals. They did a lot more returns, right? So under Clinton and Bush, the policy was send people back with like a low stakes, like slap on the wrist. Under Obama, it was changed to stop focusing on the slap on the wrists and focus on punishing people harshly. That was the policy change. That's why people call him deporter in chief, because he deported people and then you were banned from the country for years.
Workplace enforcement.
Right.
So Bush would go around to be like, oh, okay, these people are working illegally in the United States, and they would have an enforcement action, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Obama was spending more effort on the other. Let me find an okay. I found something for you. Removal is the compulsory movement of a non-citizen out of the United States based on a formal order of removal, and a return is the movement of a non-citizen out of the United States based on a permission to withdraw their application for admission at the border
an order of voluntary departure. So, in other words, Obama did more removals, which is basically compulsory, and Bush and Clinton did a lot more removal or returns, excuse me. So there was a lot more people were allowed to leave without being ordered to than under Obama, who got them formally ordered to leave.
Okay.
So the total number of people who left under Bush from both of those combined is greater, but the force of the removal, the legal jeopardy that was attached to the removal was higher under Obama. So
Okay.
Obama was harsher to the people that left than Bush was, even though there was more people, as you rightly pointed out, that left under Bush
Okay.
after interacting with the government.
Okay.
And so that's why people. So the reason, and also there's something to keep in mind here politically. Obama had 60 senators and a huge majority in Congress when he was elected in 2008. So from 2009 to January 2011, he had a ability to do whatever he wanted with immigration policy. And he did nothing. Instead, they passed no immigration bill, and he was harsh on immigrants for his entire time in office. That's why people call him deporter in chief, because what you and I, the layman, think of deportations, he was. The voluntary return shit, no one cares about that. It was what Obama did with ICE and what Obama did with the immigration courts that made him deporter in chief, and the numbers bear that out. We're so bitter because when you get a formal removal order, you're pretty much never going to be allowed to come back into the United States.
Okay.
That's like really bad for you.
Yeah.
So that's where the deporter in chief stuff comes from. And then I'm glad you did the research, because you're right. Like, obviously more people, actually significantly more people left under Bush than under Obama. However, significantly more people were treated harshly by Obama. That's why there's a distinction, and I think it's important that everybody understand why there's so much bitterness with Obama from immigration rights activists, because they see that. And
those are necessary forces. These activists and advocates and lawyers, we need them on the ground pushing these administrations left and holding them accountable. So I don't have a problem. It's totally expected that these advocates would come out in opposition to reopening a facility like that. I get that. I don't begrudge them for that whatsoever. I guess my question is, what is the leftist solution to this immigration crisis right now?
I appreciate you asking me to speak for all of leftists, and I have the ego to do it, so this is good. What I would say is, like, I am definitely much more of an advocate for basically very open borders, in the sense that if somebody wants to come here and they want to start a life here, it's much preferable to allow them to do so to the maximum extent possible, and then to incorporate them into our society, formalize their existence, have them pay taxes, and then after a certain period, then they can apply for citizenship and have it be done relatively quickly. That was the immigration policy that we had in this country for the longest of time. And I think there's a lot of fear of people of, like, wow, if we do that, then it's just going to flood in here uncontrollably, and it's going to be, we're going to have millions of people pouring into the country. And I actually just don't think that's well-founded fear. Based on, like, what's going on right now. Like, immigration is going down right now, even though, like,
well, it's spiking now.
So there is when you have these discussions, people talk about data points that are like single data points, and they take them out of context. Overall, immigration to the United States has been declining significantly, even under Obama. Why? Because we don't have as many good economic opportunities for middle-class people here. So, the American dream is dying. It sucks to be, like, you don't get paid very well here in America. There's not a lot of good jobs. So why the fuck would you move here? People move for economic opportunity or for family. People don't just want to, like, move for no reason.
It's going up now.
There is a small spike of it going back to, like, sanity, which people were actually net negative from the United States to Mexico under Trump.
Well, it's pretty logical, right? Like, because if you're a citizen of a Central American country that you want to get out of, or Mexico or something like that, or South American country, and word travels in your country that a new president has been inaugurated who is much less tough on immigration, it logically follows that you would see a spike in people.
More people who want to try to come. Yeah, right. So, but here's the thing. So there's a fear. And in this country, we had wide open immigration policy for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And so the fear was racially based. Once the type of immigrant that was coming to the United States was not white, then the fear mongering was
acceptable, and that's when we got this very strict regime.
Yeah.
I think returning to a kind of relatively lax immigration policy is a good idea. And honestly, that's the strength that America has. Quite frankly, we brain drain the rest of the world. People get to come here with educate, like an adult moving here is a gain for us because we didn't have to educate a child. We didn't have to raise a child. We didn't have to, so they come here as a working age adult. That's pure profit for the United States. They're getting somebody who is coming here to do a job, and we didn't have to pay to develop that personal capital of that human being that's working for us. Immigration is a positive for our country.
Right.
And I think getting more immigration would be a good thing.
Well,
now, there's some sort of number where maybe I would push back on it, but I don't think that that's a actual problem that we're facing right now.
Specifically right now, and I agree with you, I'm very pro-immigration, and I think that we should have much looser borders along the southern border. But specifically on the topic of unaccompanied minors,
okay. What should we do with unaccompanied minors?
How do you process? Because I was talking to Chad about it before. You can't. I don't think it's humane to send them back. I'm glad that Biden has reversed that policy from Trump, and he's allowing unaccompanied minors to be processed into the system. You can't just drop them off at a bus stop down the street. They don't have any money. They don't know anybody. They don't know the language. And you can't.
Night Moves just said something. Yes, but safety, avoiding extortion, corruption, and violence are the biggest reasons. Much of this isn't about economics and opportunity anymore. Thus, it's worth to risk their life crossing illegally. Thank you, war on drugs. Also end the war on drugs. You can't turn them over to the first adult that shows up to claim them, because you don't know who that adult is. You have to run a background check, otherwise you don't know if you're giving them to a child trafficker or something like that. So if these three things are true, then the existence of holding centers, whatever you want to call them, the verbiage is not that important to me, but the existence of some area where they can temporarily reside while we process them into this system, that must necessarily exist. And that I don't think is a popular thought with a lot of leftists on Twitter.
Okay. So obviously, a discussion of a retweet or a tweet, even of the smartest person, is not going to be their highest level thinking. But what I will say is, I do not believe that using a Trump area facility in the middle of nowhere is a good policy. Away from the eyes of immigration advocates, of the community, of journalists, that seems to be a bad policy. If I were to do it, if I were to design it from the ground up, I would incorporate these unaccompanied minors into a robust foster system. They would immediately just become, we would have a certain percentage of people that would be moved around the country. A child would come to the United States and we would start to integrate them into our society if they were unaccompanied. We'd look to locate their parent if possible and
or
try to
family.
link them again, or extended family, and have them move in with them if they're in the United States. If they're abroad, we would try to reunite the family and bring the parents over here, because I think it makes absolutely no sense for a child to be separated from their parent. If their parent is able-bodied and not an abuser, we should be looking for them and finding them and reuniting them with their child, giving them asylum opportunities as well. And then for the children that are truly orphaned, truly alone, then we use a foster system. And it will take time. And everybody who's reasonable understands that it will take time. I think what people are pushing back against is these detention facilities that were built in the Trump administration, and people are rightly very suspicious. They're pushing back immediately. I don't think that this is the long-term plan for Joe Biden, and I hope the pushback makes them realize that it would be a bad long-term
Lasers
plan.
Pew Pew,
And they come up with something
5
new.
gifted as well.
In my local area, we had, I remember this very well because I was running for office in 2014.
What kind of office?
In
were you
Pennsylvania,
running?
for the legislature.
Thank you,
Yeah,
everybody.
State rep then?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And there was a group of unaccompanied minors that had come to the United States, and we had these facilities that were nonprofits for children in difficult circumstances. And they were being basically bused to a specialist facility where we had psychiatrists, but it was in my local community. It was right there. And unfortunately, Tea Party, proto-Trumpian people tried to physically block traffic in the road to prevent these children from coming up into this facility.
Fucking assholes.
And of course, don't even get me started.
on what I think of Trump supporters and Tea Party people too. But the what I'm trying to highlight here was they were being brought to a facility that was specialized in treating children that had gone through trauma, not a facility that was, basically what amounts to a juvenile detention facility.
Is
And
it
you're
though?
right.
With like a
There has to be some period of time. We have to be reasonable here.
Doing great, Mike.
You can't just put these children willy-nilly
Thank you,
anywhere, and you need to try to get the documents and do all those other things. But the optics and frankly the process here is broken and we shouldn't accept it. Even though I understand, even if I believe you that Joe Biden's heart's in the right place, this is just not a good way
Hype
of
train,
doing it.
folks. Hell yeah.
I don't claim to speak on like the nature of Joe Biden's heart. I have no idea what his actual intentions are. I'm just talking about like the actual policy and what it actually means. So if we're having a discussion about oversight, I'm completely with you on that, and reevaluating how strict our borders are. I think we should do that. That's obviously not going to happen in the next 4 to 8 years, but yes, that would be the right path to go down. I don't get.
Wait, what won't happen in the next 4 to 8 years?
Peter the
loosening up
Greek.
our borders with
Thank you
Mexico.
for the prime. Why not?
With Joe Biden. I mean, do you see that
Why
happening?
the fuck not? Sign an immigration law. Why not?
Not in the way that you and I are thinking, like a return to like pre-1950s. I'm going to agree with you that that's probably not going to happen. My ideal immigration policy is not going to happen, but some serious reform could definitely take place. It could, but you need a lot of public pressure, and right now immigration is just one of those topics where, like, for example, of all the recent Biden executive orders, the only one that is actually truly unpopular, can you guess which one it is?
I mean, I know as a long experience politico, I always know that you can get people to say some pretty shitty stuff about immigration.
It's allowing more refugees to settle into the United States. That's the only one that's like underwater.
This doesn't surprise me because of Fox News and right wing.
For many, yeah, sure, for whatever reason. I mean, there are many reasons. There is a lot of latent xenophobia in this country. And I
think we're getting to the end of this portion of the debate. I think we started to ramble about other things. So I'm gonna call it when we get to the end of the immigration thing.
Is this whole like equating what's happening in this facility with what was happening in ICE detention facilities under Obama and Trump?
Okay. So I have a question for you. What's substantially different by having the children at a facility now than as after Trump revoked the family separation policy?
Can you repeat that question?
What's substantially what would be the difference between having the unaccompanied children in these facilities under Biden versus under Trump?
Thank you, Doge Father. Appreciate that.
After they revoked the family separation, is there really no important difference, or is there another important difference, like the processing?
I don't know if there would be a big difference. I mean, the big difference here is that Trump didn't allow unaccompanied minors to stay. That was his policy. I don't know when it comes to the family separation policy how so many kids ended up in the foster care system, but that was their stated policy, was just to turn these kids away. But the point I'm trying to make is that I don't necessarily see a meaningful difference, but there doesn't need to be a meaningful difference, because I'm not opposed to the idea of holding kids in facilities until they're processed into our system.
Okay, so the kids in cages thing, what you're saying is that we were not actually serious about the kids in cages as a critique. We were just unhappy about the exact.
No, the kids in cages, that shit was real and it actually happened, but that was not what's happening in
it happened under Obama.
Yes, but that's not what's happening in an HHS facility. Those images were from ICE detention centers, from CBP detention centers.
We're being very literal about the cages. It has to be a specific cage.
Was, yes.
Okay, gosh, yeah. I think a lot of other people were not as literal as you were.
So wait,
it would be kids in basically detention without having committed a crime.
But you just agreed that they would have to be detained in some way. The only thing that you disagreed with was you didn't even disagree. Your emphasis was on making sure that these living conditions are humane. But I thought just a few minutes ago.
No, you're absolutely okay. I see exactly. I'm not trying to beat you up, and I'm not trying to debate. I know exactly what you're saying.
Okay.
I believe there has to be some amount of time that's a reasonable amount of time before we put these children somewhere. However, I think that trucking them out in the middle of nowhere to a former logging camp or oil camp that's hundreds of miles from any community that's a facility built by Trump that costs $780 a night per child, that seems pretty unreasonable.
Okay.
That's where people have a problem with it, because it is continuing a lot of the policies that took place under Trump. Now you can say we need to do it because of practical considerations, but the larger critique is then undisturbed. You're saying we just have to do it as an emergency measure while we do something differently. And a lot of people are saying, okay, what's the thing that's different? And that's why there's a lot of heartache and a lot of frustration over the lack of an alternative.
What's different between an ICE detention center and a holding facility like an HHS one like this one? I mean, there are many differences.
But this was built by Trump, wasn't it? Isn't this a Trump policy?
I don't understand why that is super relevant though. Why does that matter? Like if this was a facility that.
Okay, so let me just hop in the middle of what he's saying here. AOC had a very, 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 very good tweet on this. She replied, "This is not okay, never has been okay, never will be okay, no matter the administration or party. Our immigration system is built on a carceral framework. It's no accident that challenging how we approach both these issues are considered controversial stances. They require reimagining our relationship to each other and challenging common assumptions we take for granted. It's only 2 months into this admin, and our fraught, unjust immigration system will not transform in that time. That's why bold reimagination is so important. DHS shouldn't exist. Agencies should be reorganized. ICE gotta go. Ban for-profit detention. Create climate refugee status, and more. And immediate improvement would require influx facilities with children to be licensed. Another issue is whether these services could be contracted out the way they currently are should be contracted out the way they currently are to begin with. Whether facilities with controversial records, e.g. Homestead, should be reopened." And so that is exactly what we're talking about here. No one here on the left is saying that we're going to instantaneously warp into a golden era of perfection.
Met every one of your standards, right? So if it was closer to the general population,
it wasn't a live debate. We did this last night.
If there were
off my stream,
better living conditions or whatever, and it was built by Trump, would you oppose it just because it was built by Trump?
Okay, no, of course not.
So then I don't really understand why that is like super relevant.
So you do say, okay, so all right, so a lot of people, especially in the immigrants' rights community, when people were protesting kids in cages, they thought they were protesting children being held in government detention for extended periods of time.
Well,
Other people literally just meant cages.
Well,
they didn't mean long-term government detention.
The kids in cages thing, that is just, in my mind, when I think of that, what really kicked that off was the family separation policy. That's what kicked that off. It was after the policy was announced and enacted that all those images went viral, and all of a sudden a lot of people who had no fucking clue, including myself, I mean, I was largely unaware of a lot of the processes when it comes to immigration, but that is what raised awareness to the larger humanitarian crisis that's been going on under a border for quite some time. But it kicked off in earnest after the family separation policy was announced. That's why people were protesting. It's just the imagery of the actual detention centers was a lot of what was driving the emotions behind that, and rightfully so.
Sure. Because it's also, the ICE agents taunting the children as they cried. And stuff like that. You remember that?
There was all kinds of.
So that's why we don't trust
shit.
these people. That's why like the same people that were working in ICE and taunting children and torturing them and abusing them and all the horrible things that you and I are well aware of, they're still working for ICE. There was no great purge of Trumpian ICE people, right? So all the scumbags who went to work for ICE so they could abuse immigrants are still there. And so there is a real reticence to trust those people with these children in the middle of nowhere.
But this isn't ICE though. This is HHS.
I mean, you're right. You're right. But the expansion of HHS under Trump was also full of really bad people.
But it wasn't as problematic as ICE, though, as far as I understand. Maybe I could delve into it further, but I don't think it was.
I just don't think that anybody who's criticizing this is doing so. I don't think they're lying. I don't think they're doing it in bad faith. I think they are just frustrated that we have this long-term issue that hasn't come, and Biden doesn't have a good resolution for it. And yeah, it's going to take time.
Well, I like a pathway to citizenship. I like that bill, and I
think it's way too long. I think it should not be. That's the lesson I'm learning right now. 8 years. That's an absurdity. Maybe more like 4 or something. Why does it need to? Why 8 years? That's obscene.
Well, I mean, I truthfully am not prepared to get into the complexity of that sort of.
Yeah, well, fair enough. Yeah.
But I do like the fact that for the first time, I think ever, right, there is a pathway to citizenship being proposed.
Well, Reagan amnestied people, so
He did, yeah, but was that from an executive order or was that through a bill? I don't remember how that worked, but in either case, and I also like the fact that Biden has given new guidance to ICE to sharply limit who they remove from the country. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing.
How do you feel about abolishing ICE?
I'm open to that.
Seeing how it was created, like, you know, we both are much older than ICE itself, and
Right.
the culture of it being so like mixed up with
That came about in the aftermath of
toxic stuff.
September 11th, right?
Yes. Yeah. So they reorganized a lot of stuff into the Department of Homeland Security.
Beautiful.
Which,
Thank you, everybody,
you
for
know,
supporting the stream.
Seems to me to be a gigantic waste
Good shit,
of money
chat.
and doesn't do anything. But so they moved, like, for example, like the Coast Guard and the Secret Service.
Okay, chat, I think we're pretty much done talking about immigration. I think we keep talking for another like 10 minutes, but I don't think there's any more immigration stuff. You know, so I'm gonna call it there. And so that was the debate with Hutch. I hope you enjoyed it. We do politics here every morning starting at 10 a.m. 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. You can watch us here on Twitch. We're the morning guy, the morning politics guy, Politics Frogs, in every single day, same time, 10 a.m., day in, day out. And we carry you through your morning and early afternoon politics needs. And if you need more, Mike from PA, we have a YouTube channel. We talked about suburbs, the My Pillow guy, Ted Cruz. We talked about DSA. Amazing. Making fun of Tim Pool. Amazing. Look at all of these amazing videos. Get in there, watch them. We have me on Twitter. You got to follow me on Twitter, chat. I'm at 20,614 subs. That means I got like 40 followers on Twitter in the last day. You can do better than that. You can do better than that. Go follow us on Twitter. And of course, join the Discord, where we have an incredible community of left-wing streamers. We have left-wing community. We talk about the stream. We talk about politics. There's gaming content. It's a really awesome, supportive place. Direct action, mutual aid, and you can just let off some steam. And also, you can help produce the show. One of the things I do is I look at the links that are put into the news content suggestions chat room on the Discord. Join the Discord, come hang out, and maybe what you want me to talk about will be part of the next show.